So in our last video, rulers around Eurasia used gunpowder to build pretty extensive land empires. However, building the empire is only part of the battle. The real struggle is in maintaining it. The maintenance of empires, really of any states, can break down into a few parts. First, there's the actual functioning of the government, which is obviously important. You need both a well-trained bureaucracy of officials and an army to keep your control. You also need a stable system of tax collection so that you can get the funds to do the stuff. And by that, I mean pay your army, they're the last people you want mad at you, and fund your projects. The second part of maintaining the empire is legitimizing and justifying your control. Basically, how do you convince people that you and or your dynasty deserve to rule them? To achieve this, many rulers use religion, art, architecture, or a combination of all of the above. First, let's talk about these new bureaucratic or official elites. We'll start in the Ottoman Empire. As the Ottoman Empire expanded, it needed to create a way to manage its affairs in the provinces and wanted a reliable and loyal group of individuals in order to achieve this. So they created a process known as the Dev Shirmeh. Since it's illegal for one Muslim to enslave another Muslim, and these officials were essentially going to be slaves, they recruited boys from Christian towns in the Balkans, educated them, gave them a very high status, and sorted them into either the tax collecting government official branch or the military elite janissary branch. This functioned on a few levels. First, these boys became a new elite and were afforded more opportunities than they would have been. However, they were taken from their homes Hunger Games style, forced to convert to a new religion, which to them meant condemning their souls, and if they served in the palace, they were castrated. Secondly, the Christian Balkan states, while trying to subvert this as the best they could, were basically on their best behavior because the empire, after all, had their sons. In the Mughal Empire, Akbar created an efficient system to collect taxes and to toe the imperial line. Because the Mughals, like the Ottomans, ruled over a large portion of their empire that had a different religion, it was important to Akbar to extend power to those who had traditionally been in control, namely here the local Hindu princes and other leaders. To them, he gave the ability to collect taxes for him, getting them on his side and making sure that the traditional power structures of most towns were not actually that disrupted. This new elite class was called the Zamindars. Something similar occurred in the Tokugawa shogunate in Japan. During the 15 and 1600s, Japan was emerging from feudalism a la Europe and was consolidated under the military control of the Tokugawa family, the longest lasting dynasty in Japan from 1600 to 1868. Their major ruler, Tokugawa Ieyasu, needed a surefire way to maintain his control by wresting it from the local lords, or daimyo. In order to undermine the power of these daimyo, the samurai who had served them were recruited to be his officials for his new Tokugawa government. This way, rather than looking for wars to fight, the warrior class was repurposed to serve the shogun. Furthermore, the shogun required that all the daimyo, about 260 of them, maintain their residence in his new capital of Edo, which is modern-day Tokyo, making sure that they were short on funds and close for him to watch. A similar idea lay behind the model employed by Louis XIV in France. Basically, the poster boy for absolute monarchies, Louis inherited the throne at 5 and reigned until his death nearly 70 years later. He consolidated all the power of the state in his person, proclaiming "L'état c'est moi," or "I am the state." Working with his Minister of Finance, Louis reorganized the provinces of France, appointing intendants to make sure his taxes were collected and his laws upheld. Furthermore, Louis built an epic new palace city out of his hunting lodge about 40 miles from Paris. He forced his nobles to live there and to serve him, again undermining their ability to plot against him and lowering their status by making them his servants. So once you develop these fancy tax collection and bureaucratic systems, what do you do with all your tax money? For many leaders in this period, projecting their power and their right to rule was of utmost importance. Most leaders used a combination of religion, art, and architecture in order to achieve these goals. We'll stay talking about Louis and his palace of Versailles. The palace itself needed a staff of about 5,000 people in order to keep it running. He choreographed the fountains, included a hall of mirrors, and basically decorated it as a testament to his own power. His use of portraiture, common among rulers, symbolically proclaimed how he was better than everyone else. Look at those legs, the legs of a fit and trim and smart dancer. Look at that sword, no need to use it. Look at those surroundings. Do you know anyone as rich or impressive as the king? King James I in England used similar ideas. Like Louis, both men supported the theory of the divine right of kings, the idea that kings were God's appointed representatives on earth, and that it was God's will that they exist and that the people serve them. King James would go on to say, "The state of monarchy is the supremest thing upon earth, for kings are not only God's lieutenants upon earth and sit upon God's throne, but even by God himself are called gods." This basically meant that if you questioned the king or tried to overthrow your king, you were making moves against God himself. Not a good choice. Louis would proclaim one king, one law, one faith, and mercilessly persecute other Christian denominations and Jewish communities. Outside of Europe, architecture and religion were no less important to projecting the power of the absolute monarch. In Mughal India, the creation of mausolea, like the mausoleum of Humayun and the Taj Mahal, proclaimed the grandeur of the emperor either upon his death, as in the case of Humayun, although it actually was Akbar, his son, who created it, or the grandeur of the emperor through the burial gift that he would give to one of his wives in the case of the Taj Mahal. But Taj Mahal not only proclaims the greatness of the Mughal kings through its sheer scale, yep, those are people, but through its fusion of Hindu, Muslim, and Persian elements that speaks to the unity of Mughal India, whether real or imagined. Portraiture didn't escape the Mughal rulers either. In this portrait of Akbar's son, Jahangir, we can see him sitting on top of an hourglass labeled, "May he reign for 1,000 years," as angels dance overhead. He sits above all of his visitors, including King James and the Ottoman Sultan. Qing rulers employed portraiture as well to convey their power and status. Members of the royal family are shown decked out in sumptuous clothes, dazzling in their jewelry, lounging, riding horses, or meditating. What an alpha move. The Forbidden City in China functioned in a similar way for the Ming Restoration. You may recall that after the defeat of the Mongol Yuan dynasty, the native Chinese Ming sought to forget as much foreign dominance as possible. Like Louis XIV and Versailles, the Forbidden City was created partly as a new capital city in order to proclaim the new power in China. The deeply ingrained Confucian elements of the Forbidden City help them do just that. First off, it completely separates the imperial family from the common people. Next, it even further separates them by having some parts reserved for the government and its functioning, and then the very back part reserved for the royals. This layout means that everyone maintains proper Confucian relations according to their status. The names of the buildings themselves help proclaim power. For example, the emperor's personal palace is called the Palace of Heavenly Purity. That's one way to put it, I guess. Power and authority are two different things. With power, you can force people to do things. With authority, they actually carry them out. It's one thing to wow your population into compliance and another to force it at gunpoint. Leaders during this period had to figure out which way was best to control their populations. Most opted, as we could see, for some combination of the two.